No one plans for their marriage to be tested on a quiet Friday afternoon. Alina Parker believed her life was steady, safe, and predictable. She had built it that way. 7 years of marriage to Daniel had shaped her into someone calm and understanding. Daniel worked long hours at a growing marketing company, always chasing the next big project. Alina supported him without complaint. She managed the house, handled the bills, remembered birthdays, and kept everything running smoothly. She told herself that love meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant silence. That Friday started like any other. The sky was pale and cloudy, and the house felt unusually still. Daniel had left early, rushing out with toast in his hand and his phone pressed to his ear. He barely noticed when Alina told him she planned to spend the afternoon sketching. He had nodded absent-mindedly and said, "That's great, Al." Before the door clicked shut, Alina stood alone in the kitchen afterwards, staring at the empty doorway. She had once imagined her afternoons differently. Years ago, before marriage, before responsibilities, she had dreamed of becoming a painter. Her college professors believed in her. Friends used to call her the artist. But dreams can become quiet when life grows loud. Over time, her canvases were packed into boxes and pushed into the closet. She told herself she would return to them later. Later never seemed to come. She was washing dishes when her phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," she answered warmly. "Alina, I need a favor," Daniel said quickly. Voice carried stress. "I left some important client documents at home. Adrian is nearby. He's going to pick them up. I'm stuck in traffic. Can you let him in?" Adrian Harrison. Daniel's boss, Alina, had met him once at a formal dinner. He was confident, polished, the kind of man who looked directly into your eyes when speaking. She remembered how easily he had moved through the room, shaking hands, commanding attention without raising his voice. He was different from Daniel, older, composed, observant. "Of course," Alina replied. "I'll take care of it. Thank you. Won't be long." The call ended, leaving a strange flutter in her chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something she couldn't name. She glanced around the living room. Magazines lay stacked neatly. The couch cushions were straight. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the walls. Everything looked normal, yet the quiet felt heavier than before. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Alina wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the door. For a brief second, she hesitated. Then she opened it. Adrian stood there in a navy suit, sleeves slightly rolled as if he had just left a meeting. He held a leather folder under one arm. His expression was polite, but his eyes were sharp and attentive. "Mrs. Parker," he said with a small smile, "thank you for letting me stop by." "Please call me Alina," she replied, stepping aside to let him enter. The scent of his cologne lingered softly in the air. Not strong, just noticeable. She closed the door behind him. "Daniel mentioned the documents are in his office," she said, leading him down the hallway. He followed calmly, observing the framed photos on the wall. Wedding pictures, vacation, snapshots, moments frozen in time. "You have a beautiful home," Adrian said. "Thank you. We've worked hard for it." He nodded, as if he understood the weight behind her words. Alina handed him the folder from Daniel's desk. That should have been the end of it. He could have left right then. But instead, he glanced at his watch and said, "I'm a bit early for my next meeting. Would it be all right if I stayed for a few minutes?" The polite answer would have been, "No." But she heard herself say, "I can make coffee." They returned to the living room. The sound of the coffee machine filled the silence. Alina focused on small tasks, cups, sugar, spoons, anything to steady her thoughts. When she handed him the mug, their fingers brushed lightly. It was accidental, brief, but it sent a quick spark through her. She pulled her hand back. They sat across from each other. At first, they spoke about simple things: Daniel's work ethic, the company's growth, the city's traffic problems, safe topics. Neutral ground. Adrian listened more than he spoke. When she talked, he held her gaze, steadily, as if each word mattered. It had been a long time since someone listened to her like that. Daniel often seemed distracted, tired, halfway between work and home, even when sitting beside her. "You must be proud of him," Adrian said. "I am," she replied without hesitation. "He works very hard." "And you, eh?" Adrian asked calmly. "What do you work hard at?" The question surprised her. She gave a small laugh. "Keeping everything together, I guess." "That's not a small thing," he said. "But I meant for yourself." She didn't answer right away. No one had asked her that in years. She searched for something simple to say, but the truth hovered. At the edge of her lips. "I used to paint," she admitted finally. "A lot." His eyes lit with interest. "Used to. Life gets busy. That's not the same as losing passion." The room felt warmer suddenly. Alina shifted slightly. On the couch. "It's just a hobby." "I don't believe that," Adrian said gently. "Not the way you said it." His tone wasn't teasing or flirtatious. It was thoughtful. Serious for a moment, she imagined her old studio apartment. Sunlight on blank canvases, music playing softly in the background. She remembered how painting made her feel alive, focused, certain of who she was. "Do you ever feel," Adrian continued, "like you've put parts of yourself away for someone else's success?" The question landed deep. She looked down. At her hands. "That's marriage, isn't it?" "Not always," he replied. "Sometimes it's fear." She looked up quickly. "Fear of what?" "Fear that if you chase your own dreams, you might outgrow the person beside you." The words hung between them. Alina felt her heartbeat quicken. She didn't know why his opinion mattered so much. He was just her husband's boss, a visitor, someone passing through. But his presence made her aware of something she had ignored, a quiet emptiness she had learned to live with. "You're very observant," she said carefully. "It's part of my job," he answered. Then his expression softened. "But some things are obvious." Silence followed. Not awkward, but charged. Outside, a car passed down the street. A dog barked in the distance. The world continued normally, while something small shifted inside. Her dot. She stood abruptly. "I should check if Daniel called." Adrian nodded, respectful. He didn't move closer. He didn't cross any lines. Yet the air between them felt fragile. When she returned, he was standing near the bookshelf, studying a framed painting she had done years ago. She had almost forgotten it was there. "You painted this?" he asked. "Yes, it's beautiful," he said simply. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. Compliments from Daniel were rare these days, usually quick and distracted. Adrian's words felt intentional. "You shouldn't stop," he added. Before she could respond, the sound of a car door slamming echoed outside Dacho. The spell broke instantly. Adrian straightened. Professional once more. Alina stepped back, creating distance that suddenly felt necessary. The front door opened and Daniel walked in, slightly out of breath. "Adrian, thanks for coming by. Sorry about the delay." "No problem," Adrian replied smoothly. "Alina kept me company." Daniel smiled, unaware of anything unusual. He kissed Alina lightly on the forehead before turning his attention back to work talk. As the two men discussed contracts and meetings, Lena stood quietly in the kitchen doorway, watching them. Everything looked normal, but inside her chest, something had awakened. Not desire, exactly, not yet, but awareness. Awareness of what she had buried. Awareness of how invisible she had begun to feel. When Adrian finally left, he paused at the door. His eyes met hers for a brief second. There was no smile this time, just a look that seemed to say, "Don't forget who you are." Then he walked away. Daniel returned to his phone, already distracted by another message. "He's a good man," he said casually. "Brilliant, too." Lena nodded. "Yes, he is." But that night, as she lay beside her husband, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop replaying the conversation, the questions, the way Adrian had seen parts of her that even Daniel no longer noticed. It frightened her not because something inappropriate had happened, but because something meaningful had. And deep down she sensed that this was only the beginning. After that quiet afternoon with Adrian Harrison, Alina Parker tried to return to normal life. At least she told herself that was her plan. Daniel carried on with his work, checking emails, attending meetings, and managing clients, just like any other week. Alina prepared their home for the weekend, ran errands, and kept her routines. She smiled, she laughed when Daniel joked, she made dinner, and she pretended everything inside her heart was untouched. But the truth was far from calm. Elena's thoughts kept drifting back to Adrian's calm presence, the way he had asked about her dreams, the way he had made her feel seen in a way Daniel hadn't in years. It was strange and confusing. She couldn't put it into words without feeling guilty. After all, Daniel was the love of her life. She loved him deeply, but life, routine, and years of obligations had dulled parts of her soul. Adrian hadn't done anything wrong. He had only been attentive. And that attentiveness had reminded her that she still longed to be noticed. A few days passed. Daniel mentioned Adrian casually, like an everyday topic. Harrison's under a lot of pressure with the new client. "I hope he gets some time off soon," he said one morning, sipping his coffee. Alina nodded politely. Each time his name came up, she felt a flutter in her chest that she hated to admit. It wasn't romantic in the shallow sense. It was awareness. A question rising inside her. Am I truly fulfilled, or am I just existing? That week, Daniel told her Adrian would be coming over for dinner. The purpose was professional, to thank Adrian for covering an important meeting in Daniel's absence. Alina agreed, telling herself she was being practical. She needed to host. She needed to be polite. She needed to act normal. On the day of the dinner, Alina busied herself in the kitchen. She arranged plates, polished glasses, and tried to steady her hands that shook just a little more than usual. The familiar smells of cooking filled the air: roasted chicken, fresh herbs, and the faint aroma of baked bread. Everything smelled like normal family life. But inside, her heart pounded in a rhythm she had forgotten she could feel. When Adrian arrived, he looked exactly as he had before: confident, polished, calm. Yet this time, familiarity lingered between them. It wasn't loud or inappropriate. It was subtle, a quiet recognition of their last conversation. He greeted her politely, shaking her hand, and complimented her on the meal. Elena's lips curved in a smile, but she felt tension simmering beneath. She could feel the unspoken connection hovering in the air, unacknowledged yet present. Daniel seemed oblivious. As usual, busy talking about the company's growth, the client's needs, and the upcoming projects that would demand long hours. His words were excited, animated, filled with energy and ambition. Alina listened, nodded, and smiled, but she noticed something she hadn't in a long time. Daniel's focus was on everything but her. He was proud, yes, ambitious, yes, but he no longer asked about her, her days, her feelings, her dreams. That gap, invisible for years, suddenly felt heavy. Throughout dinner, Adrian observed her quietly. He didn't pry or comment, but his presence had weight. His eyes followed her lightly, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that reminded her she was alive, she was seen, and her existence mattered. Alina could feel the contrast sharply. Daniel, busy with the future, and Adrian, present in the moment. When dinner concluded, Daniel received an urgent phone call. He excused himself and stepped outside to take it. The house fell into silence. Alina washed her hands, preparing to clear the dishes, but Adrian remained in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. The quiet between them was different this time, heavier, personal. "You don't look happy," Adrian said gently. Alina hesitated. "I am happy," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She realized her own words were a mask. They always had been. Happiness had become synonymous with stability, comfort, and routine. But fulfillment? That was a different story. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. He didn't touch her, didn't invade her space, but the energy between them pulsed quietly, unmistakably. "There's a difference between being grateful and being fulfilled," he said softly. Elena's throat tightened. His words echoed in her mind. She thought of the paintings she had packed away, the evenings she had spent longing to travel, to explore, to create something just for herself. She realized suddenly that Daniel hadn't asked her about her dreams in years. Her life had become about survival and support, not joy or expression. For a fleeting moment, she imagined a different life, one where someone paid attention when she spoke. Someone noticed the depth in her eyes. Someone understood the quiet longing that lived inside her. She imagined freedom, creativity, and passion, all in ways she had almost forgotten were possible. She drew back slightly. "This isn't appropriate," she whispered, as if saying it out loud might make the feeling disappear. Adrian's gaze softened, a mixture of understanding and regret in his eyes. "I know," he replied quietly. "I know the lines we don't cross are important." The words felt like a bomb and a warning at the same time. They had recognized each other's loneliness without acting on it. They had glimpsed a possibility without giving in. That delicate balance made the air feel fragile. Daniel returned moments later, cheerful and unaware. He carried his phone, speaking animatedly about the client, the project, and the timeline. Alina forced a smile, relieved and frustrated all at once. Relief because the dangerous tension had broken, frustration because the emptiness Adrian had revealed was still there. That night, Alina lay in bed beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling. She listened to his steady breathing, the familiar sound that once brought her comfort. But now it felt like white noise. She thought of Adrian, the questions, the attentiveness, the genuine acknowledgement of her existence. She hated that she felt stirred by someone else's kindness. And yet she couldn't deny it. Alina realized her life had become routine, predictable, safe. And there was nothing wrong with that, logically. She loved Daniel. She had committed herself to him in every way possible. But the routine had created a void she hadn't noticed until someone else illuminated it with the simplest words. Adrian hadn't seduced her, hadn't touched her, he'd simply noticed her. And that, more than anything else, was what had unsettled her in the days that followed. Alina found herself recalling Adrian's questions, his tone, the way he had looked at her. Each memory stirred emotions she couldn't quite name. Weren't romantic, not entirely, but they were powerful. They made her question the life she had settled for. She asked herself why she had allowed her own dreams to fade. Why she had stopped asking for more from life and marriage. She noticed her own dissatisfaction creeping into everyday moments. Washing dishes, preparing breakfast, answering Daniel's emails, they all felt heavier now. She saw the empty walls in her home, the blank canvases tucked away, the colors she hadn't used in years. Her dreams weren't gone. They had only been paused. And Adrian's presence had reminded her of that when she returned to painting. Even briefly, she felt a spark she hadn't experienced in years. Each stroke of the brush brought a memory, a hope, a question. Could she still have the life she wanted and the love she cherished? Could she be fulfilled while staying married to Daniel? Alina didn't have answers yet, but she knew one thing. Something in her had shifted. That afternoon with Adrian had shown her the cracks in her routine, the silent longings she had ignored, and the need for recognition, attention, and validation. Not from another man, necessarily, but from life itself. She also realized that Adrian wasn't the solution. He wasn't an intruder or a temptation to be acted upon. He was a mirror, reflecting the parts of herself she had forgotten. That reflection made her uncomfortable, aware, restless. She felt a pull toward change, but whether it would be with Daniel, Adrian, or herself alone, she didn't yet know. And so life continued. Daniel went to work, Alina handled the house, Adrian occasionally appeared in conversation. And the tension of unspoken possibilities lingered like the quiet hum of a song half remembered. Alina found herself in a liminal space, caught between love, loyalty, longing, and awakening. The days grew into a week. A second dinner with Adrian was proposed under the guise of professional courtesy. This time, Alina prepared differently. She dressed thoughtfully, arranged flowers on the table, and tried to steady the storm inside her. She wanted to remain composed, aware, and true to herself. When Adrian arrived, she noticed immediately the subtle changes. He seemed more relaxed, more attentive, more aware of her presence. He complimented her on small things. The way she served the food, the decor, even the way she laughed at Daniel's jokes. Each remark, subtle as it was, carried weight. Throughout dinner, Daniel remained focused on work matters. Excited, animated, planning, calculating. Alina noticed it more sharply now. She realized she hadn't noticed this distance before because she had accepted it as normal. The contrast between Daniel's focus and Adrian's attention made the emptiness in her chest undeniable. When Daniel stepped outside to take a phone call, the tension returned. Lena and Adrian stood together in the kitchen, alone. The quiet between them carried the weight of everything unspoken. "You don't seem happy," Adrian said gently. Alina admitted to herself this time, "I'm not fully happy." Adrian didn't push. He didn't comment. Alina Parker knew that life had shifted the moment Adrian Harrison left her house that evening. It wasn't the brief moments, the polite smiles, or the quiet attention he had shown her. It was the mirror he had held up to her own life, reflecting the cracks she had ignored for years. She lay awake that night beside Daniel, listening to his even breathing, thinking about the empty spaces she had learned to accept. Part of her wanted to ignore the feelings that stirred inside, to dismiss Adrian as a brief passing reflection. Another part, a louder part, whispered that she could no longer stay silent. She had to confront the truth, both in herself and in her marriage. Days passed. Life continued in its usual rhythm. Daniel left for work each morning, busy with meetings and deadlines. Alina performed her tasks, prepared meals, cleaned, and maintained the home with the steady, practiced care of someone who had learned to live in routine. And yet, she felt a quiet unrest. Each phone buzz, each email, each message from Daniel reminded her that life was moving quickly around her. But she had paused somewhere along the way. She longed for attention, for acknowledgement, for recognition, not from Adrian necessarily, but from someone who truly saw her. And then came the message. Her phone buzzed quietly while she arranged flowers in the living room. It was Adrian. "I hope you're doing well. I don't know if you haven't forgotten your dreams." Alina stared at the words. Simple, short, harmless, yet the effect was profound. Her heart beat faster than she wanted it to. She read it again, trying to tell herself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. The message stirred something that had been quiet for years. A longing she had tucked away, a part of herself that had been silent, waiting. She didn't respond immediately. In fact, she set the phone aside. Instead of replying, she sat quietly, thinking about the life she had built with Daniel. They had shared so much together. The early struggles, the shared laughter, the tears, the milestones. She loved him deeply. But love, she realized, was different from fulfillment. And in that moment, she understood that a choice had to be made. That evening, when Daniel returned home, exhausted but smiling, Alina felt a wave of clarity wash over her. She watched him hang his coat, brush his hair back from his forehead, and sit down at the kitchen table. The familiar comfort of his presence was there, but so was the gap she had ignored for too long. She waited for him to notice, to ask about her day, but when he didn't, she decided it was time to speak. "Daniel," she said softly, catching his attention. He looked up, slightly startled. "Yes, Al. I need to talk to you," she said. Her voice was gentle but firm. He frowned slightly. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," she admitted. "I feel like I've disappeared." The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy. Daniel leaned back, the tension in his shoulders evident. "Disappeared?" He asked cautiously. "What do you mean?" Lena took a deep breath. She spoke slowly, deliberately, explaining what she had felt over the past months. The quiet, unnoticed moments, the sacrifices she had made, the dreams she had paused. It's the emptiness that had grown in the spaces between their routines. She spoke about her longing for recognition, for attention, for a life that included her own passions and desires, not just the well-being of the family and her husband's career. Daniel listened, truly listened. Not distracted, not trying to solve the problem immediately, but listening in a way he hadn't in years. He saw the weight in her eyes, the tremble in her hands. And he understood for the first time how deeply she had felt unseen. "I thought I was building a future for us," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I didn't realize I was losing you in the process." Lena's heart softened. She had expected anger, frustration, even rejection. But what she received was understanding, and that was the bridge she needed. For hours they talked. No interruptions, no phones, no distractions. They revisited old memories, shared regrets, expressed fears, and remembered why they had fallen in love. Each story brought them closer, reminded them of the connection that had once been effortless. It illuminated the cracks they now faced together. By the end of the night, Alina felt a weight lift from her chest. It wasn't that all problems were solved. Marriages never offered instant solutions. But for the first time in years, she felt seen, acknowledged, and understood. The presence of Adrian had been a catalyst, a reminder of what she had ignored, but the resolution would be found in her marriage with Daniel, if both of them chose to invest in it. The next morning, Alina began small but meaningful changes. She carved out a corner in their home for a painting studio. Blank canvases were unwrapped and placed carefully on easels. Brushes and paints, once forgotten, were washed and organized. She allowed herself moments of creativity each day, reclaiming parts of herself she had set aside for too long. Each stroke of the brush, each color mixed, each detail painted reminded her that she could be both a wife and an individual, both supportive and fulfilled. Daniel noticed. He asked questions, not to control or critique, but to encourage. He adjusted his work schedule when possible, giving her space for her art. He listened more. He complimented her efforts. He reminded her that her passions mattered as much as his career. Slowly, the routine of their marriage began to change. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in meaningful, intentional ways. Alina never sent a response to Adrian. She deleted his message after reading it carefully one last time. She didn't need him to act as a mirror anymore. She understood herself, her needs, and her boundaries. The reminder had been valuable, but the direction of her life would be guided by choice, love, and commitment, not fleeting attention. Months later, the small studio in her home became her sanctuary. She painted not for fame or recognition, but for herself, and in doing so, she discovered renewed energy, inspiration, and joy. Her marriage grew stronger. The honesty and vulnerability she had shared with Daniel had built a new level of trust and intimacy. They spoke more openly, shared more deeply, and remembered the foundation of their bond: love, respect, and a willingness to grow together. Alina reflected often on that Friday afternoon when Adrian had first arrived. She realized that temptation doesn't always roar or demand. Sometimes it whispers, quietly nudging you to see yourself, to acknowledge your needs, and to confront the parts of life you've ignored. That day had shown her that awareness was necessary, honesty was vital, and choices mattered. She had been faced with a possibility that could have led elsewhere. But she had chosen to invest in her marriage with full eyes and a braver heart. She also realized that love and passion weren't mutually exclusive. They could coexist if nurtured intentionally. She could be a wife, a partner, and still be her own person, fully alive in her passions. Daniel could be ambitious, devoted, and still attentive to her needs. Together, they rebuilt a connection that had been quietly fraying, creating a life that felt both secure and vibrant. Adrian faded from her thoughts, not because he was unimportant, but because he had served his purpose. He had reminded her of herself, illuminated what she had overlooked, and allowed her to see clearly. The danger wasn't him. The danger was the emptiness she had allowed into her life. With awareness, honesty, and courage, she had reclaimed both her dreams and her love. Their marriage wasn't perfect. There were still long hours, moments of frustration, and times when routines threatened to dull the excitement of life. But they faced them together, openly and intentionally. Alina had learned to speak up when something mattered to her, to ask for support when needed, and to cherish moments of connection, small or grand. Daniel had learned to listen, to notice, and to appreciate the woman who had been with him through so much, whose dreams had waited patiently for recognition. The lessons were clear. Love alone cannot sustain a relationship. Awareness of each other's needs, dreams, and passions must accompany it. Temptation isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it is a teacher, a mirror, a gentle push towards self-reflection and growth. And choices, consciously made with courage and integrity, shape the direction of a life shared together. Elena's life and marriage were richer for the experience. She had been tested not by betrayal or action, but by awareness and opportunity. She had faced her own longing, recognized it, and made a conscious decision to invest in the love she had chosen. Her creativity flourished. Her heart felt lighter. Her marriage grew deeper. She had discovered that passion, love, and fulfillment could coexist when nurtured with honesty and intention. Weeks turned into months. Alina painted every day. Daniel made time for her, sometimes just to sit and watch her work. They laughed, shared memories, and remembered why they had chosen each other in the first place. The house felt warmer, fuller, alive with shared life and individual growth. And sometimes, when Alina thought back to the afternoon Adrian had come to the door, she smiled quietly to herself. Not with regret, not with longing, but with gratitude. He had reminded her who she was. He had reminded her to wake up, to notice, to feel. And most importantly, he had reminded her that the power to choose, to act, and to nurture her life belonged to her. And with that choice, she had chosen love, growth, and fulfillment together. Alina Parker had been left alone with her husband's boss once, and in that quiet, unassuming moment, she had found clarity, courage, and the strength to rebuild the life she truly wanted.